it talks about humor so that you can interject some sort of humor, dry humor or not. But you have to know one thing in advance. Are you a funny person? Or are you trying to be a funny person? Okay, if you're not really a funny person, my suggestion, don't do it. Okay, it's because nothing is worse than somebody who's not funny who's trying to be funny, and it goes a long way.
Hello, welcome to Creativity Boost Podcast. Today I'm super excited because I have on the show with me Michael Forman. He's an expert when it comes to the field of networking. And when I say networking, I don't mean networking in the digital sense of the word. I don't mean cybersecurity and whatnot, but I mean actually networking between two persons or more. And so we're going to be talking about something really, really captivating that we have titled How to Build Rapport, How to Build a Network with Creativity. Hi, Michael. How you doing? Good to have you on the show.
Hi, Daffy. It's great to be here.
Yeah. Now, I had to clarify for our listeners that when we're talking about networking, we're not talking about networking of two machines between each other, but we're talking about human networking. And I feel like it would be good if you could just give us an understanding of what networking means to you.
Well, networking means several things because you network one-on-one when you're meeting with somebody, and you network with 50 people going to a networking event. But the steps you take are primarily the same because you don't know who the person is. You have to get to know them. And it all starts from the beginning when you shake hands, when you walk up to somebody. You're smiling and you're shaking hands and you're shaking with a firm handshake. All of that plays into it. All of this is basic skills for human interaction. It's basic communication skills. But I found that a lot of people don't know these things.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of people don't know these things, and a lot of people think they can wing it when it comes to networking. But I've come to learn and I've come to discover that networking deserves as much intentionality as any other human skill that we give attention to. And that's why I brought you on the show, because you're the expert when it comes to networking. You want to tell us a bit about your journey into making this whole concept of networking into a live work that you do?
Sure. Well, networking has been a part of my life, for as long as I've been in the business world. I've owned pizzerias. I've been in the mortgage industry. I was in the military, and all of these things, you're networking with people. But in the military, I was a lot younger. I was 21. I was in there for 9 years. But I found out how to approach somebody that was older than you, a higher rank than you, or a lower rank than you. So it really depends on how you communicate with them. When I got into the business field, when I was in the mortgages, I was a sales manager. So you had to discuss with everybody. You had to take, 10 or 15 different loan officers, and there are 10 or 15 different people, and they all react a different way. But it's just getting the basics down to get them forward. Okay. And that leads me up to, I was working for a law firm and speaking with people on the phone, and all of this is the same. I've been speaking for about 10 years, and I've been really my journey was perfecting the way to communicate with one another. And the only thing I would like to say is that when you communicate properly, that will increase the bottom line. That'll increase your profitability. If you don't communicate properly, then the other person will just say, thank you very much, and they're going to go somewhere.
Yeah. And that brings me to the next part of our conversation, because what I like to do as a thought leader when it comes to creativity is to help people understand the intersection between creativity and every other thing that we do, and every walk of life and every body of knowledge. And networking is something I feel and I believe and I know that requires some creativity in succeeding at, because you've got to be unique in the way you network with people such that you can stand out when you leave their presence, when you leave their midst, so that you can leave a good impression. You can be at an event and meet 50 people, but just 1 or 5 people stand out and leave that impression in you. 50 people can submit a proposal for the same thing, and just 2 or 3 people make that connection that I can attribute to that rapport, that networking framework that has been established. So what do you think about the need for creativity in building a network, whether between one-to-one or one-to-many or many-to-many, and building a rapport in general? What do you think?
Well, is very important. It's probably the most important thing. When I speak to corporations, when I speak at conferences, it always comes down to the rapport. And you smile, you shake their hands, and everything. You have from 30 seconds to about 3 minutes to figure out where you are, where it stands, to build that rapport. And it doesn't sound like a long time, but it's enough time for you to, for instance, let's say you walk into somebody's office. You have basically 1 minute to scan his office or her office. And you're scanning for pictures of a child, pictures of, is it his child or her child? Is it her grandchild, his grandchild? Do you have something from youth sports? Do you have something from the major leagues? You have all this, and you can always find something to talk about. And the thing is that you never talk business right away. Okay? I come from New York, and it's always fast, 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 fast. What can you do for me today? And I'm living in the South, and it's a whole different ball game. Okay. But, you sit down, and let's say, now I was a baseball coach for 16 years. I was an umpire for 3 years. Wow. So if I see something for youth sports, I know I'm in. Okay. Because I will have them talk about their child, their grandchild, and everything else. And once you get that person to start talking about themselves, about their family, that opens up a whole new thing. And I have just a quick, it's a word, form, FORM. And just the key things in my mind. F is for family, O is for occupation, R is for recreation, and M is just any message that you can think is important. But you can always talk about family, their occupation, how long you've been doing this, would you like to do something else? How about recreation? Do you play sports? Do you like to go water skiing? Something like that. Get on the same level and have them talk about themselves. And then that breaks down the first layer.
Wow. And that is really phenomenal. So you talked about not talking about business first when you meet someone to build that rapport. And that, brings me to my next question, because what if the person actually knows you came for business, and you know you came for business, and the person knows you're trying to make small talk just to get them to like you, and they don't want to give you that leverage, right? And so there's this wall. They build a wall when you're trying to connect. You're trying to reach beyond that wall, but they seem resistant and hesitant to allow you to build that connection. What do you do? And have you ever been in that situation before?
Oh, sure. Listen, I've been in sales my whole life. And so I was in that situation many, many times. But the whole thing is, you can't go in thinking you're there to see a client or to get a client. You're there to build a relationship. Okay? And when I talk about everything else but business. It's how I bring up the subject. It's how I, start the conversation. And that will immediately set that person at ease and have them talk a little bit. Or it'll be a little bit more difficult when he's just talking business. But if you're there to build a relationship instead of just a client, then you'll go a whole lot further.
Okay. So you mentioned about you being in your 20s and having to go into offices of people who were way ahead of you in age and in their careers and whatnot. And I feel like we should drill down a little bit into that, because one of the barriers that many creatives have is being able to connect with people who are, in a higher class or in another space than they are familiar with, whether it's an age difference, whether it's a career difference, whether it's a religious difference, whether it's an ideological difference or a psychological difference, to be able to come out of your bubble and enter into someone else's bubble and create that connection within a short space of time. Do you have any framework or any experience, going through all of these hurdles that hinders people from being able to network efficiently?
3 words: practice, practice, practice. Okay? Listen, nobody's going to walk into a new anything and be able to go right away and speak on their level and just talk about everything that they want to talk about. Okay? You have to, that's why building the rapport is so important. When you first walk into the office, you have to see what the office is. When I went to a construction site, I was in a dress shirt and a sports coat. When I went to an office, when they were just wearing dress shirts and a coat, a blazer, I wore a shirt, a blazer, and a tie. I'm always one step ahead. And this way, they'll never look at me like I'm just like, oh, well, he didn't know how to dress. Okay? So then when you speak when you speak to the janitor or the CEO, you have the same amount of respect. Okay? You have to have that same respect for no matter who you talk to. And you have to talk to them as if they're that important. So you talk to the CEO, obviously he's going to be that important. Talk to the janitor, well, everybody else is going to think, well, he's just a janitor. No, you never know who you're talking to. And you always give the person the same amount of respect. And that's how you build up to that point.
Wow, that's great. Now, let's talk about your journey. Can you tell us a bit about how you help people, build this, and maybe stories of people who you help to overcome the challenges they're having around the subject of networking?
Well, that, it falls into my coaching, my workshops, things like that. I can take a little bit more time with that individual person. So what I do is I put them through a series of encounters. And I see where their strong parts are, and I see where their weak parts are. So you would think that I would immediately start with their weaknesses, but I don't. I start with their strong points, and I get them to where they are solid. And then I start to introduce the points that are weak, because you have to build up the confidence. They have to be a confident person to be able to walk into an office where they don't know anybody. Okay, so you are the person. You're the person that you're going to walk into the office and you're going to say, "Hi, I'm here to see Mr. Smith." Well, Mr. Smith is busy. Can you see whatever? You have to be able to go with the flow, but you have to be that confident person and go and deal with it as it comes.
Okay, so why is networking important? Why is networking important?
Networking is important not only for business, but in your personal life. Okay? So when I say networking, besides the digital end. If you want to network, okay, whether it's a one-on-one or in a business circumstance, that's fine. But what about when you go to the grocery store? What about when you go to a jewelry store? What about when you go somewhere? It's talking to that person one-on-one and being able to be confident in your conversation, and have the other person believe that you are an expert in this field. So one thing always lies with the other, but networking is not only a business thing, but it's a life lesson as well.
All right. Now, can we talk a bit about your book? Because I'm aware that you're also an author. So do you want to tell us a bit about your book and what inspired the book, what inspired the title, if you will?
Well, what inspired the book was 10 years of talking about this. Okay, that inspired. And the book, Networking Unleashed, available on Amazon, I want to tell you, you can... It starts, again, with the smiling, with the shaking of the hands, the building of rapport, humor, okay? It talks about humor so that you can interject some sort of humor, dry humor or not, but you have to know one thing in advance. Are you a funny person, or are you trying to be a funny person? Okay, if you're not really a funny person, my suggestion, don't do it. Okay, it's because nothing is worse than somebody who's not funny who's trying to be funny, and that goes a long way. But then I get into about when you go to networking events, things you have to do. You make a networking event, whether it be one-on-one or a networking conference or anything like that. Put it on your schedule. Make it mandatory, because look, the first time you go out, you're not going to do well, okay? But you get better and better and better. Another little tidbit is go alone. Go by yourself, because when you go with somebody, what's the first thing you do? You stay with that person. So if you go to a table of 5 and you're with somebody, well, now it's not 4 more people, it's actually 3 more people. So you're actually hurting yourself when you do that. I would suggest go early. Go early, find out the lay of the land, and stay late, okay? Because people are going to do things at the very end, and you're not going to... It's amazing the things you can walk away with when you stay to the end. Right? So it's really... when you're walking around and you're feeling confident, okay, that's number one thing, is that confidence. And when you talk with somebody, you talk about being the expert in the field. And the book obviously goes along with that. Another thing is when you give information, you're going to expect to give any bit of information that you can, not expecting to get anything in return. Okay, so that's the whole thing. You're going to give as much. You also say, oh, what do you do? Oh, you're in plumbing supply. Well, that's great. How can I help you sell plumbing supply? It was like, well, what? You want to be a salesperson for me? Yeah, because whenever I bump into anybody, I want to be able to recommend you. So let me have your card and your information, and I can always recommend you. Be their salesperson. And if you do things correctly, they're going to ask for your card. Now, I also say this. If you go to a large event and it's 3 hours long, 4 hours long, if you've given out more than 10 cards, you gave away too much. You have to be really specific in who you give your card to, besides the people that ask for it. Okay, so all of that is very, very important. And just remember that you're building relationships, not just connections. It's a relationship because you want to be able to sell for that person, refer that person. You always want to give more than you receive. And if you do that often enough, it'll come back around. Now remember, here's a mantra. I call it the networking mantra. If they know you, if they like you, and they trust you, they'll do business with you. And they can't do business with you unless they do the first three. Okay? So know you, like you, trust you, they'll do business with you.
Okay. Now, thank you for that response. I found that really profound. What about in the case where we have personality types where a person is an introvert? Because many creatives I've come to discover are introverted in nature, and socializing and talking to people and connecting with people doesn't really come naturally to them. So if you were to speak to someone who is an introvert and the person knows he's an introvert and the person feels helpless, what would you say to help that person develop that skill of networking?
Okay. I'm going to go back to the 3 words. Practice, practice, practice. If you're extroverted, that's easy. If you're introverted, you have to take small steps. I don't mean just throw you into the deep end. Okay? Which means that you have to go out to a grocery store. Go with somebody. And you spark a conversation. And even that's usually in a grocery store, the conversation lasts about 30 seconds. Okay? But it's little things, little steps. Okay? And then somewhere else where you're involved in a slightly longer conversation and you build it up that way. And you build it up to where, like, oh, you know what? I actually had a whole conversation with that person with more than one person. Usually introverts, one-on-one, they're not bad at all. Okay? If there's 2 people involved or 3 people involved, then the world starts to get smaller. Okay? Mm-hmm. And that's where they have to start to break out. So they have to do it in small increments and practice, 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 practice.
Okay, I have another question for you. Now, let's say you're in a work environment and your team is invited to a lunch with maybe some top executives, and you're introverted in nature, but your team is not so much of the introverted, personality makeup. And your team seems to get along with these executives. Is it okay for that creative to just be quiet and smile? What would you recommend for that individual in that setting where he was pulled into the deep end without any preparation, and now he doesn't even know how to get himself into the conversation without looking stupid or sounding stupid? What would you recommend?
Okay. Now, was I part of the group that was pulled in? Was I there or not there?
You were not there. You were not there.
Okay. I was going to say I'll give you both. I'll give it to you both ways.
Okay.
Okay. The first way is I was there. Okay, and I know my team, and they're brought in. So what I would do is I would have that introvert say something. Like, we worked on that project, but Terry was the one who really led us. Terry, want to tell us a few minutes about it? And have her speak up. Okay? Now, if I wasn't there, and if it was just a team of people, there's always a leader. There's always a leader. Now, a leader isn't a boss. Okay? And a boss is not a leader. Okay? There's many differences, but a leader would know his team and would know who the introvert is, and he would make it his business or her business to have that person speak up. Not much, but a little bit, just enough where they would know her name, they would know his name. I would say her, but it's his name also. Okay, now those alpha males, alpha people, will try to dominate the conversation. And it's up to the leader of that team to calm them down and to have each person speak. So there's a big difference between a leader and a boss.
Wow, thank you so much. That was a very profound response. And now that brings me to another question that I have for you. Now, there's different categories of creatives, as far as I'm concerned, there are 7 categories that I like to work with and help. But one of those categories are people who I refer to as discouraged creatives. These are people who lack family support. They lack some kind of community around their idea, around their product, around their service, around their invention or creation. These are people who they don't have a huge following on social media. They've not yet attained the celebrity status. They've not been able to garner a following yet. So they're discouraged. They don't even have, the financial support. And everything I've said boils down to the same thing we're talking about, building that rapport, whether it's online, offline, within the family. And sometimes these things are just the way they are. It's not of no fault of the individual, because these things sometimes are just the way they are, or they may need some more time to nurture, right? But these things are the way they are. It is what it is. So what would you say to someone who we recognize as a discouraged creative because of the way things have become based off what I've described now? You don't have following, you don't have followers, you don't have support, even from a family. You've not been able to garner a community around your idea, your product or service. And like we have established, to be able to, sell anything, you need to build a rapport, you need to network with people, you need to build a community. So what would be your recommendation to this individual I've just described?
Unfortunately, there are a lot of people that you're describing. There's a lot of people out there like that. But, okay, let's just take it down to the central idea.
Okay.
They don't have any support. They don't have a big following. They know what they want to do, but they can't get the message out there. My suggestion, now, if they have a friend, a closer friend, okay, have you heard of being a ghostwriter for a book?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So they can be their ghost social media person. Okay. Have them put all the stuff out there, all about her has this problem, okay, under her name and everything else, but she's not going to write it because she's not in the right frame of mind to write it. So I'll say her friend is Sally. Okay, Sally, you're going to post for me on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Okay, now these are the things I'm doing. That's okay. Let me handle it. And Sally will do the posting. And before you know it, people are going to say, wow, I didn't know you did that. I didn't know you did that. Well, you know what? I did that, but I didn't do any of this. Sally did. Okay? But everybody's going to think that she did it. And that's probably the best way for somebody in a circumstance like that. And just getting her, that will help her get her out of that situation. Okay, because that's not a good situation. That's not a healthy situation. Not having somebody to talk to, lean on, discuss things with. Okay, that's a very bad situation. So this will help bring it out.
Wow, that's another good one. If you could help us with the other side of things, because you talked about the one where there's an online challenge. What about the offline one where you don't have family support, your friends don't want to support your idea, or are not, in sync with what you're trying to achieve with your goal, with your aspiration, or with your product or service?
Well, it's almost the same thing. Okay, I'm assuming that she has one friend. Okay, and so have that one friend. If it's material, if it's a product to sell or something like that, let her be part of that. Let her share in the profits also. Okay, but let her be the voice, be the face. You can be my wife's a graphic designer. She hates being in front of anybody, but she'll do the work. Okay, so I can go out now. She's gotten a lot better over the years, but it's the same thing. Do the work behind the scenes. Have somebody else go out and either sell it, promote it, anything like that. And before you know it, it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger, where somebody will say, "Hey, how did you do that?" Or "I want some," or "I want 10 of them." And it's a slower process, much slower, but it'll work.
Wow, that's super helpful. Thank you so much for all of those amazing responses. I know I put you on the spot a couple of times with all my different scenarios, but you always,
right.
you always hit the home run, and I want to say thank you for that. Now, if someone out there listening to us hears all of your beautiful solutions, creative solutions to this problem we just talked about, and they want to go deeper with you, they want to work with you, they want to come under your program, is there any way they can do that?
It's very simple. What people have been doing, they've been going to my website, because on my website, michaelaforman.com. Right? So if you go on there, there's a contact form, whether it's a one-on-one, whether it's coaching, whether it's a workshop, or an hour speak time, whatever, within your corporation. I could come in and talk to your salespeople. You know what? I usually, if they have 10 salespeople, I tell them, okay, so who answers the phone for these salespeople? Who are the people or the assistants or that lead up to the salesperson? Okay, all of a sudden that number is like 35 or 40 people. I said, those are the people that I want in with my talk, because those will aid and support all of your salespeople, okay, and help your networking throughout. So going back again, michaelaforman.com. You can fill out the contact form, and I'll get back to you in the same day.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michael, for coming on the show. Thank you for dropping all the golden nuggets on how to network and build rapport with creativity. And to you, my listener out there, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this episode. I believe you got some value from our conversation. And if that is actually the case, I encourage you to drop us a review on whatever podcast platform you listen to your podcast. Review us, share this episode with a friend, a loved one, a family member, so that they can also learn how they can build their network, build rapport, because this is something that I believe many creatives have a challenge with. And I want to believe that listening to this episode is going to help you a great deal. Thank you once again for tuning in. I'll see you in my next episode. Until then, have a good one. Bye.